You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with Titans-Ravens. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the Titans. They played a typical Titans game. There's not much to say there. They're a really good team. Ryan Tannehill is really good. Derrick Henry is great. Corey Davis and A.J. Brown are a really, really good 1-2 punch at wide receiver. The defense was okay. But that's been the case with basically every Titans game this year. The defense hasn't been great. There's not much to talk about with the Titans, but there is a lot to talk about with the Ravens. A Ravens team that is really struggling right now. They've lost 3 out of their last 4. And it's probably going to be 4 out of their last 5. Do you really think they're going to beat the Steelers on Thanksgiving? I don't, I'll tell you that. There's a lot to worry about right now if you're a Ravens fan. Lamar Jackson has underwhelmed. He's not having a bad season, but he's not having a great season. Maybe the expectations were too high on him, but you've got to do better than throwing for less than 200 yards per game. We're 10 games into the season. You've got to have over 2,000 passing yards. He does take a lot of sacks. He does have a tendency to put the ball on the ground. If you're a Ravens fan, you've got to be concerned about this. They have the second worst mark in the NFL in terms of passing yards per game. You know who's worse? The Jets. When only the Jets are saving you from being last in something, you know that you're terrible at it. And I'll give you another stat that's kind of misleading. The Ravens are first in the league in terms of rushing yards per game. But a lot of that is because of Lamar Jackson. Jackson is their leading rusher, and it's not even close. As great as Lamar Jackson is with his legs, you still need a talented backfield. Take a look at those old Atlanta Falcons teams with Michael Vick at quarterback. Michael Vick was never the leading rusher for the Falcons. You know who was? Warwick Dunn. A 3-time Pro Bowler. A guy who had 3,000-yard seasons for the Falcons. You've got to have a competent backfield regardless of who your quarterback is. Even if it's a quarterback that's dropping back and throwing 30 to 40 passes a game, you still need a competent running game. This committee approach that the Ravens have in the backfield, it doesn't work for me. Dobbins, Edwards, and Ingram are talented players. I'm not knocking them. They've each averaged over 4 yards a carry. They've all scored multiple touchdowns. But don't you want to lead back? Don't you want a horse back there? A 3-man approach doesn't work for me. Because that shows that you're relying too much on trickery. You don't have the skill to get the job done. So you have to come up with a gimmicky approach. At the end of the day, the Ravens do run a lot of gimmick plays. A lot of these options for Lamar Jackson, the designed quarterback runs, those are gimmicky. And let me tell you, if the Ravens make the playoffs, which isn't a guarantee right now, they're on the outside looking in. As it stands right now, it's a 3-way tie for that final AFC wildcard spot between the Raiders, Ravens, and Dolphins. The Raiders have the tiebreaker. But if you get into the playoffs, good luck. I don't care who you go up against. The Steelers or the Chiefs. There's no way you're beating them. Now, a lot of the blame has gone on Greg Roman. And rightfully so. I don't think Greg Roman's a good offensive coordinator. He did this with Colin Kaepernick, and I have my issues with Kaepernick. But at the end of the day, his NFL career should have been better than it was. Greg Roman really didn't help him. And he's really not helping Lamar Jackson. Roman does deserve a lot of the blame for what's happened this year with the Ravens. He is the seminal reason that they're underachieving. I mean, this is a team that I picked to win the Super Bowl. I wanted to be a little different. I didn't want to pick the Chiefs. Everyone was picking the Chiefs. I wanted to be a little different. So I said the Ravens. I said Ravens-Buccaneers. And I didn't realize that the Super Bowl this year was going to be in Tampa when I said that. Could you imagine a Super Bowl in a team's home stadium at only 20% capacity? If ever there was a year that you would want one of the Super Bowl teams to play at their own stadium, this is the year. I mean, the Buccaneers look like a solid pick. The NFC is wide open. I can make a case for a few NFC teams to make the Super Bowl. The Saints, Seahawks, Packers, Buccaneers, Rams, maybe Cardinals. The AFC, it's really between two. You've got the Steelers and Chiefs. But the Ravens should be in that conversation. Lamar Jackson proved everyone wrong last year who said that he was just a wide receiver or a running back. No, he's a quarterback. He can play. Give him credit. But part of being a quarterback is having your team be successful. And let's be honest, the Ravens have drastically underachieved with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. His first ever playoff game against the Chargers was without question one of the worst playoff games I've ever seen a quarterback have. Until the fourth quarter hit, Lamar Jackson looked like he should be playing Pop Warner Ball. Then the year after, the Ravens have this great regular season. They go 14-2. They get the first round bye, and they get upset by the Titans. There is this stigma around Lamar Jackson that you can't win with him. Is it too early to say that definitively? Yes, but the stigma is going to keep growing and growing and growing until he actually wins the big one. The Ravens are in trouble right now. Can you win with Lamar Jackson at quarterback? You should be able to. What you've got to do is settle in on a true backfield hierarchy. Let Lamar Jackson do Lamar Jackson things. I don't mind that. But have a lead running back behind him and have a second running back behind him. The three-headed monster stuff doesn't work for me. Have Dobbins as the lead back. Have Edwards as the backup. And you can move on from Ingram because he's going to be 31 in less than a month. And for God's sake, get rid of Greg Roman because he is useless. Moving on now to Lions-Panthers. P.J. Walker got his first ever NFL start. There were some rumblings that Teddy Bridgewater was gonna tough it out and play this game, but ultimately he didn't play. Will Greer didn't play. It was P.J. Walker who carried the load. And, hey, give him credit. He wasn't bad in his first NFL start. He wasn't great. He completed 24 of his 34 passes for 258 yards. He threw a touchdown pass to Curtis Samuel. He threw 2 interceptions. He fumbled the ball once, but the Panthers fell on top of it. For someone making their first ever NFL start, you can live with that. I mean, the thing that Matt Rule did that I really liked was he simplified the offense for Walker. There weren't any crazy plays. He really only had to get 3 guys involved. DJ Moore, Samuel, and Robbie Anderson. The running game was okay. Mike Davis and Rodney Smith did about as well as you could expect them to do. You've got to give the Panthers a ton of credit. They played really well in this game. Their defense was fantastic. I mean, obviously it was. You don't need me to tell you that. They pitched a shutout. Matthew Stafford looked terrible. The Lions couldn't get anything going on the ground. Terrible game for him. But the reason I want to bring this up is because a lot of Jets fans are naming a certain someone as a head coaching candidate. And that is Joe Brady, the Panthers' 31-year-old offensive coordinator. A guy who only has 1 year of offensive coordinator experience is being touted by some as a legitimate head coaching candidate for the Jets. Here's what I said to my friend Jim when he asked me if I wanted Brady as my next head coach. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Absolutely not. Are you kidding me? No, 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 no. There is no way on God's green earth that Joe Brady should be the next head coach of the Jets. This guy is only 31 years old. He's only been coaching football since 2013. This is his coaching experience. From 13 to 14, linebackers coach at William & Mary. 15 to 16, graduate assistant at Penn State. 17 to 18, offensive assistant with the Saints. 2019, this was the big one. Passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach for LSU. There's no question that Brady helped Joe Burrow. I'm not saying Brady didn't. But here's what you need to realize. Joe Brady wasn't calling plays. Do you know who was calling plays? I'll tell you. It was the offensive coordinator, Steve Ensminger. Brady helped, but he wasn't the seminal reason that Burrow had the season he had. Has Brady done a good job with the Panthers? Yeah, they haven't been bad offensively this year. Teddy Bridgewater's having a good season. The Panthers' offense has stayed afloat with the absence of Christian McCaffrey. DJ Moore's having a great season, so is Robbie Anderson. But when you look at team stats on offense, here's where the Panthers rank. Total yards, 20th. Passing yards, 17th. Rushing yards, 20th. Points and third down percentage, 21st. And yes, Brady is responsible for that. He's calling plays for the Panthers. Now, I don't know how, if you're David Tepper, you sign Matt Rule to that contract and then say it's okay that you delegate play calling. If I was Tepper, I'd want Rule to call plays. And if I was Rule, I'd want to call the plays. But whatever, not my money. Here's what you need to realize when thinking about who the next head coach of the Jets should be. You're going to be in a position, if you're the Jets, where you have Trevor Lawrence, and you're going to be able to surround him with a solid skill position group. You can draft Travis Etienne. You pair him with LaMichael Pirine. That's not a bad backfield. The wide receiver core, hopefully Allen Robinson, Denzel Mims, Jamison Crowder, maybe Brashad Perriman, depending on how he feels about being the fourth wide receiver. You've got something there. Tight end needs work, but that's what the draft is for. That's what free agency is for. The offensive line, with the exception of Connor McGovern, is solid. You don't want to trust a 31-year-old kid with just 1 year of NFL play calling experience under his belt to make this work. If the Panthers' offense was putting up 50 points a game, yes, bring in Brady. And I'm not even saying that Brady will never get an opportunity. In a few years, he will. But you can't do it now. You've gotten too many hires wrong recently if you're the Jets. John Idzik, Mike McCagnon, Todd Bowles, John Morton, Jeremy Bates, Adam Gase. I'm willing to put Joe Douglas in that group. You can't get this wrong. There is no way that you should give the keys to the kingdom to a 31-year-old. Now, some people are bringing up Sean McVay. And I understand that everyone wants the next Sean McVay. But here's what you need to realize. When McVay was hired by the Rams, he had 3 years of offensive coordinator experience with the Redskins. And he had spent 7 years with them total. McVay had earned his stripes. Brady hasn't. No, there is no way that Joe Brady should be a head coach next year. For any team, not just the Jets. Whatever team is looking for a new head coach. The Texans, the Falcons, the Giants maybe, the Cowboys maybe, the Eagles maybe. You've got to give Brady some more time in the NFL before you make him a head coach. It's just that simple. I mean, I'll tell you who I want as the next head coach of the Jets. It's really simple. Eric Bieniemy. Are there some other guys who I'd be okay with also? Yes. Dabo Swinney, Lincoln Riley, Brian Daboll. I'd be fine with those guys. But my A1 guy is Bieniemy. You take a look at the Andy Reid coaching tree. It's a really good tree. John Harbaugh won a Super Bowl. Ron Rivera had some really good years for the Panthers. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. Sean McDermott, right now, is one of the best head coaches in the NFL. And Matt Nagy, I don't think he's a terrible coach. I think his time has come in Chicago. I'd be surprised if he lasted past this season, but I do think he'll land on his feet. I'm not saying that Nagy's Mike Ditka or anything, but I don't think he's terrible. Now, I understand that Bieniemy isn't calling the plays with the Chiefs. It's Andy Reid. But Bieniemy does have a lot of input on the game plan. Reid has spoken glowingly about him. Bieniemy's 51 years old. He's been involved in football for over 30 years. He won a national championship at Colorado, almost won the Heisman Trophy, was an All-American, had a solid NFL career, lasted 9 seasons with the Chargers, Bengals, and Eagles, and he rose up the ranks to become offensive coordinator for fantastic Kansas City Chiefs offenses. He's the guy. It has to be Bieniemy. Bieniemy is who I wanted when the Jets went with Gase. I don't know why teams aren't hiring Bieniemy. It's not because he's black. But I'll tell you, I do think that'll play into who Woody Johnson hires as his next head coach. As ambassador, Johnson made inappropriate and insensitive comments. Now, Johnson has denied it, but those allegations are out there. If you're in the NFL and you're black, who are you going to want to play for? The guy who has been accused of making terrible comments and owns a terrible football team? Or are you going to go to an owner who has behaved like a Boy Scout and doesn't own a bad football team, or at least not as bad as the Jets? The decision would be pretty easy to me. I think Johnson would be very motivated to go after Bieniemy. It would dispel the notion that he has any sort of biases. I don't know if he does. I don't know if he doesn't. I've never met the man. I just know what's out there in the news. But if you're Woody Johnson, what's the best way to prove those allegations wrong? It would be to hire a black man as your next head coach. And I'll tell you, there aren't enough black men who are head coaches in the NFL. It's terrible. It really is. The NFL is comprised primarily of black players. Here's all the black coaches that are currently head coaches in the NFL. Raheem Morris, Romeo Crennel, Anthony Lynn, Brian Flores, and Mike Tomlin. Two of those guys, Morris and Crennel, are interim coaches. So there are only 3 full-time head coaches in the NFL that are black. That is wrong. There needs to be more. I can't think of anyone better than Eric Bieniemy. There is no doubt in my mind that he's the right guy to coach the Jets going forward. Not Joe Brady. Moving on now to Falcons Saints. And remember when I said that Taysom Hill is going to need to prove that he can be a starting quarterback in the NFL? He got off to a great start yesterday. The Saints beat the Falcons 24-9. Hill was really good. Completed 18 of his 23 passes for 233 yards. He lost 1 fumble. He didn't throw a touchdown, but he didn't throw an interception. But what you love about Hill is that he was able to kill you with his legs. He had 10 carries for 51 yards. 2 of those carries went for touchdowns. I understand that you've got to do it again. And the Falcons don't have a good defense. They have a good rush defense, but they can't defend the pass. Dan Quinn did a terrible job with them. Raheem Morris has done a solid job, but no one's going to be mistaking the Falcons for the 85 Bears anytime soon. Hill sliced and diced them. Give him credit. Now let's see how the Saints do against the Broncos. A team with a really good defense. That's going to be a big test for Hill. But as of right now, yeah, you can say that Taysom Hill is the quarterback of the future for the Saints. As it stands right now, Sean Payton was right to anoint him as that. Speaking of quarterbacks of the future, is there some controversy in Miami? Brian Flores says no, but actions speak louder than words. Tua Tagovailoa was benched yesterday for Ryan Fitzpatrick. There is no way to adequately describe how stupid that decision was. Tua was not playing abhorrently. He wasn't great. He's played better. He was 11 for 20 for 83 yards and a touchdown. He didn't turn the ball over. He finished the game with an 81.9 quarterback rating. He wasn't airing the ball out. He was very conservative with his passes. The Dolphins were having trouble getting momentum going. But there are two reasons for that. Number one, you're going up against a really good Broncos defense. And number two, you're a really young offense that's going through growing pains. Every rookie quarterback goes through growing pains. Yes, Tua is going to have some bad games early in his career. That's to be expected. And when you have Salvon Ahmed as your lead running back, you're not going to do too well. Ahmed barely averaged over 3.5 yards per carry. What lesson does this send to Tua? If you play poorly, we're going to bench you? He's going to be looking over his shoulder on every incompletion. You may have just shattered this kid's confidence. Once you make that move to bench a good Fitzpatrick for an unproven Tua, it should take a lot for you to reverse that decision. It has to be consecutive games of poor quarterback play. This was the first loss that Tua has ever had in a game that he started in the NFL. He was good against the Cardinals. He was good against the Chargers. It's at Denver. Fans or no fans. That's a tough place to play. It's the Mile High City. You're not used to that altitude. You can't bench him. That is inexcusable. I mean, you may have just opened up the door for a Jets win here. I really feel like Tua's confidence may be hurt by this. What lesson does this teach him? If you have one bad game, or even less than one bad game, you're not going to make it in this league? That's ridiculous. You made the decision to bench Ryan Fitzpatrick when he was playing well for Tua. That decision signaled that you didn't care about wins and losses. Now you suddenly find yourself in the playoff hunt, and it is about wins and losses? No. You have to let the chips fall where they may. If you make the playoffs with Tua, fantastic. He gains invaluable playoff experience. If you don't, well, you'll get him next year. That was the message you sent when you benched Fitzpatrick for Tua. To renege on that is ridiculous. It is a terrible decision by Brian Flores, a terrible job by Chan Gailey, and it's even worse to pin that loss on Tua. I didn't think that loss was on Tua. I thought it was on the Dolphins' O-line. Tua was sacked 6 times. Austin Jackson, Eric Flowers, Solomon Kindley, and Robert Hunt were dreadful. Did Tua hold on to the football a little too long? You'd have liked him to have gotten rid of it a little sooner, but this is a really good Broncos defense. Yeah, you're going to need some time. That loss was not on Tua. That loss was on the Dolphins' offensive line. If I could speak directly to Tua, I'd tell him this. Put yesterday behind you. Don't think about it anymore. Focus on beating the Jets. Don't harp on this loss. Yes, your coaches made some bad decisions, but if you destroy the Jets on Sunday, and let's be honest, you will, no one's gonna remember it. Focus solely on the Jets. Alright, now I'll give you some college football Valk talk. And I'll start with OSU beating Indiana 42-35. I nailed my predictions for this game. It was touch and go there for a little bit, but I did say OSU would win, and I did say that Indiana would cover the 20-point spread. You've got to give Michael Penix a ton of credit for what he did. There's a lot to be said about leadership. When you're a college quarterback, if you have that ability to rally the troops around you and to play hard regardless of the score, that's an invaluable quality to have. Penix did that, and he was incredible. You'd like the completion percentage to be a little better, but the guy almost threw for 500 yards. He threw 5 touchdowns. Ty Freifogel did play, and thank God he did, because if he didn't, the Hoosiers would have been run out of the building. Freifogel had 7 catches for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns. Penix and Freifogel didn't need anyone else. Whop Phillier was okay, but I'd expect more of an impact from him. Stevie Scott was absolutely dreadful. Samson James wasn't much better. You've got to give Penix and Freifogel a ton of credit. They had great games. But when you look at the OSU side of things, Justin Fields' video game-like numbers have come to an end. Fields completed 18 of his 30 passes, so that's 12 interceptions. He had 300 yards, which you really like. And he was responsible for 3 touchdowns. Fantastic. But he also threw 3 interceptions. That's not that good. OSU did let Indiana back into this game. They tried to coast through the second half. After Fields threw his second touchdown pass, you got the sense that OSU was thinking about what they were going to do for dinner after the game. Their defense was atrocious. Everyone with the exception of Sean Wade had a garbage game for the Buckeyes defensively. Offensively, they were good. Master Teague was great. Garrett Wilson was great. Chris Olave was really good. This wasn't a bad game for the Buckeyes. This could actually help them. They got the win, and Ryan Day can say to them, hey, look, you can't take anything for granted. I don't care what the scoreboard says. You play until the whistle. You have to play 60 minutes. You have to play a complete game. This is a win that could benefit OSU in the long run. And this is a noble loss for Indiana. You knew they weren't going to go undefeated. They can hold their heads high. They covered the spread. They made the game interesting at the end. They're not going to go to the CFP, but it seems like they're going to be in line for a pretty good bowl game. Moving on now to Wisconsin Northwestern. And I was talking up Graham Mertz on Friday like he was the second coming of Brooks Bollinger, former Jet. And Mertz laid an egg here. You're not Justin Fields where you can throw 3 interceptions and still win. You don't have that God-given ability. Also, you're going up against a great Northwestern defense. A defense that I was definitely underestimating. Me along with everyone else in the college football world. I knew they were great, but I didn't realize how great they were. Wisconsin couldn't get anything going. On third down, the Badgers were 3 for 16. Give Jalen Berger credit. He had 15 carries for 93 yards. But he was the only guy who showed up. Jake Ferguson can't do it all by himself. Ferguson wasn't bad, but he wasn't great. And give Peyton Ramsey a ton of credit. Northwestern couldn't get anything going on the ground. Drake Anderson was useless. Ramsey was getting stymied. Cam Porter was getting stymied. But Ramsey made some smart decisions with the football. He got a bunch of people involved. He completed passes to 9 different guys. This was a really impressive win for Northwestern. And you take a look at their upcoming schedule. MSU, Minnesota, and Illinois. Northwestern could go undefeated. How do you leave an undefeated Big Ten team out of the CFP? I don't envy the committee at all. They have some tough decisions to make. Their first ranking comes out tomorrow. I think we all know what it's going to be. Some combination of Alabama, Notre Dame, OSU, and Clemson. But I'm not sure if Clemson deserves it over a team like Northwestern. Over a team like Cincinnati, BYU, Oregon, Coastal Carolina, Marshall, USC. I like undefeated teams. I don't care what the circumstance is. I don't like when one-loss teams are ranked higher than no-loss teams. What more do you want the mid-majors to do? They're going undefeated. They can't do anything more than that. Oh my God, they don't have any good opponents. Again, that's not their fault. You're punishing them for something that's out of their control. I mean, I hope Trevor Lawrence wins the national title this year. I hope he wins the Heisman this year. It'll make him less likely to stay in school, but I don't know if he deserves it. The Heisman? Probably not. The national title? I don't even know if they deserve to be in the CFP. They have a loss. Other teams don't. I hate when those schools are punished. Moving on now to Bedlam, or should I say calm. A babbling brook. A waterfall. City traffic, whatever setting you like on your white noise machine. This wasn't Bedlam. Oklahoma destroyed Oklahoma State. That game was over in the second quarter. As soon as Oklahoma went up 27-7, you knew that game was over. Spencer Sanders was dreadful. Shane Illingworth was dreadful. Chuba Hubbard and Tylan Wallace did the best they could, but if they don't have a quarterback in front of them, there's only so much they can do. Spencer Rattler was insane, completed over 70% of his passes, threw for over 300 yards, threw for 4 touchdowns, ran for another one. He was insane, and so was Ramondre Stevenson. He had 26 carries for 141 yards. Rattler completed passes to 9 different Sooners. Lincoln Riley thoroughly outcoached Mike Gundy in this game. Moving on now to Liberty being upset by NC State. And you've got to give NC State a ton of credit. Their defense was insane. This is an NC State team that has struggled defensively this year. They've allowed over 31 points per game. But they hold a potent Liberty offense to just 14 points. That's really impressive. Malik Willis couldn't get anything going. Completed less than 50% of his passes. Averaged less than 5.5 yards per attempt. Threw 3 interceptions. He couldn't get anything going on the ground. Neither could Joshua Mack. NC State thoroughly outplayed Liberty. And it's not like Bailey Hockman was that good. Hockman completed just over 50% of his passes. Threw for just over 150 yards. Didn't throw a touchdown. Threw an interception. He wasn't great. But what NC State did so fantastically was get their running game involved. Zonovan Knight and Ricky Person were insane. They each had 14 carries. They each rushed for over 80 yards. Knight had 2 touchdowns. And he had 5 catches for 34 yards. These are talented running backs, but I don't think anyone expected them to do this against a really good Liberty team. Hugh Freeze is probably still going to leave. But this stinks for Liberty. They were on their way to getting a really good bowl game invite. Now, I don't think it's in the cards for them. I do want to talk about the really sad death of Ken Schinkel, who died Friday night at the age of 87. Schinkel is an important piece of the early history of the Penguins. He started his NHL career with the Rangers and didn't do much for him. He was a quadruple A player, dominated in the AHL for the Springfield Indians and the Baltimore Clippers. But when he was with the Rangers, he didn't do much. Then in 1967, Schinkel got his big break. The NHL doubled in size from 6 teams to 12 teams. They welcomed in the California Seals, the LA Kings, the Minnesota North Stars, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the St. Louis Blues. The Penguins wanted some experience. So in the 10th round, they took Schinkel. Schinkel was immediately named an alternate captain by the Penguins, and he made a big impact for him. Very important penalty killer for him, and he was a potent scorer for him. Their first year, Schinkel put up 39 points in 57 games. Their second year, Schinkel led him in scoring, had 52 points in 76 games. The year after that, Schinkel finished second in scoring for him behind Dean Prentice. And in the playoffs, Schinkel really contributed. He had 5 points in 10 games, was their second leading goal scorer behind rookie phenom Michel Briere. And for the Penguins, he made 3 All-Star teams. 68, 69, and 71. When Schinkel retired, he was the Penguins' leader in games and points. Obviously, those have since been broken. But the way he retired was kind of interesting. He transitioned from being a player to immediately becoming a coach. He replaced Red Kelly midway through the 72-73 season. But those Penguins teams really weren't that good. His first couple seasons as a coach, the Penguins were dreadful. Then in 75-76, the Penguins started the season with Marc Boileau as their head coach. I'm sure I butchered that name. He did not have a good start to that season, so Schinkel came in to replace him. He whipped them into shape. They finished the season 20-10-7, and they went on to make the playoffs. But they would be defeated by the Maple Leafs. The year after that, Schinkel's only year as a full-time head coach, the Penguins would once again make the playoffs, and they'd once again be defeated by the Maple Leafs. But Schinkel was a very important figure of early Penguins history. Really good player for him. Decent coach for him. May he rest in peace. Big NBA recap tomorrow. I'm going to go team by team, recapping all the moves that happened from Friday onwards. That's going to be the whole show. Unless something earth-shattering happens, that's going to be the whole regular episode of the Jacob Valk Show. Until then, I am Jacob Valk saying, between owners and players, a manager today has become a wishbone.